What if your phone could talk to your fingers, not through sound, but through the language of touch itself? That's exactly what web haptics makes possible, and honestly, it might be the most underrated feature in modern web development. Web haptics is a tiny JavaScript library, just about 6 kilobytes, that brings tactile feedback to mobile web apps. You install it with npm, import it into your project, and suddenly, every button tap, every toggle switch, every form submission has a physical dimension to it. Your phone doesn't just show the user that something happened, it feels it. Now you might be thinking, do we really need vibration on websites? The answer is increasingly yes, and here's why. Mobile web apps have caught up to native apps in almost every way except one, the physical feel. When you tap a button in a native iOS app, you feel a tiny tap. When you flip a toggle, there's a subtle resistance. The web has always been silent and still. But as web apps take on more of what native apps do, users expect that same tactile satisfaction. Web haptics fills that gap. The library is remarkably flexible. It comes with built-in presets that map to Apple's human interface guidelines, which is the gold standard for haptic design. There's success for when a form saves or a payment goes through, warning for destructive actions, or when you're approaching a limit, error for validation failures or network problems. Then there's light, medium, heavy, soft, and rigid, which map to different intensities of physical impact. Selection is there too for when someone scrolls a picker or moves a slider. Each one feels distinctly different, and each one is designed to match the emotional weight of what's happening in the interface. Here's what makes this really powerful. The same library works across React, Vue, Svelte, and vanilla JavaScript. The author built framework-specific hooks for each one, so it feels native to whichever ecosystem you're already using. In React, you import the hook and call trigger. In Vue, it's the same. Svelte has a store-like creator function. And if you're doing vanilla JavaScript, you just instantiate the class and go, one library, every framework. The API is beautifully simple. You pass a string like success or error to the trigger function, and the library handles everything else. But it also goes deeper when you need it to. You can pass a raw number for a simple vibration, an array of numbers for an alternating on-off pattern, or a full object with duration and intensity for complete control. Intensity ranges from 0 to 1, so you can make a tap feel gentle or urgent. Everything gracefully falls back to doing nothing on desktop browsers, so you don't have to write conditional code. Under the hood, Web Haptics uses the Web Vibration API, which has been part of the web platform for years, but remains surprisingly underused. The browser's vibrate function takes an array of numbers representing alternating on and off durations in milliseconds. A simple vibration might be 100 milliseconds of on, followed by 50 of off. More complex patterns chain these together. What makes Web Haptics clever is how it handles intensity. The vibration API itself doesn't support intensity levels, only duration. So the library uses a technique called pulse width modulation. It rapidly alternates between on and off states to create the illusion of varying intensity. At full intensity, it's just a solid vibration. At half intensity, it pulses on and off every 20 milliseconds. At lower intensities, the pulses get shorter and the gaps get longer. Your brain perceives this as a softer vibration, even though the phone is technically turning the motor on and off repeatedly. It's the same principle that dimmers use for lights or that audio equipment uses for volume control. The library also has a debug mode that lets you hear what the haptics feel like on desktop, which is essential for development since desktop browsers don't vibrate. It creates a simple audio feedback system that plays click sounds synchronized with when the vibration would fire. It's not exactly the same as physical haptics, but it gives you a reasonable approximation for testing your patterns. There's also a toggle switch feature that the library can inject into your page, letting users turn haptic feedback on or off. This is important because some users find vibration annoying, and in some jurisdictions, it's actually a legal requirement to give people control over haptic feedback. Web Haptics handles all of this automatically, including cleaning up when the component unmounts. Let me walk you through some practical examples. Most basic usage is just calling trigger with a preset string. In React, it looks like this. You import the hook, destructure the trigger function, and attach it to any event. One line of code, and now every tap has a physical dimension to it. For form validation, you might do something like this. When the user submits and there's an error, you trigger. When it succeeds, you trigger success. The user feels the confirmation in their hand at the exact moment the visual feedback appears. For a toggle switch, you probably want light impact. It's subtle, just enough to confirm the state change. For a delete button, you might use warning giving a heavier tap that signals this action has weight. For continuous interactions like sliders, selection is your friend. Every time the slider passes a discrete value, a tiny tick fires. It makes the interface feel precise and responsive in a way that visual feedback alone can't match. The library also handles compound patterns. A nudge pattern, for instance, is 2 taps with a pause in between. It's great for reminding someone about something without being overwhelming. A buzz is a longer vibration, good for urgent notifications. One thing the author emphasizes in the documentation is that haptics should supplement visual feedback, never replace it. If someone's phone has haptics disabled, or if they're using a device that doesn't support the vibration API, the interface must still work perfectly. Haptics are additive, not essential. They make good interfaces feel great, but they shouldn't be the only way you communicate state. There's also a principle around synchronization. The haptic should fire at the exact instant the visual change happens, not before and not after. If a user taps a button, the button should visually depress and the haptic should fire together. Any perceived delay breaks the illusion the device is responding to your touch. The library also has limits built in. Each vibration phase is capped at 1,000 milliseconds because browsers have their own limits, and the library validates everything to make sure you can't accidentally pass invalid values. If you pass something nonsensical, it simply won't vibrate and it won't crash. To give you a sense of the design philosophy, this library was built with Apple's human interface guidelines in mind. Those guidelines break haptic feedback into 3 categories. Notification feedback is for the outcome of a task, like success, warning, or error. Impact feedback is for physical collisions like light, medium, heavy, soft, or rigid taps. Selection feedback is for discrete steps in an interface, like when you're moving through a picker. Each preset maps to one of these categories, and the intensities are tuned to match what Apple expects. If you're targeting iOS users, these presets will feel instantly familiar. The library is zero dependencies, which means it won't bloat your bundle or create supply chain vulnerabilities. It weighs about 6 kilobytes minified, which is essentially nothing. It works in Next.js with a simple use client directive, and it works in SvelteKit and Nuxt directly since they handle server-side rendering gracefully. So why is this exciting? Because mobile web apps have been missing the physical dimension of interaction for years. We've gotten incredible at making things look good and animate smoothly, but they still feel flat. Web-haptics is a small library that solves that specific problem elegantly. It handles all the hard stuff from cross-browser quirks to intensity modulation to framework integration and exposes a simple API that just works. If you're building any mobile-first web app, this is the kind of detail that separates good products from great ones. Buttons that tap, toggles that click, forms that confirm with a pulse. It sounds like a small thing, but it's the difference between a screen that shows something and a device that feels alive under your fingers. You can find web-haptics on NPM, and there's a demo site with interactive examples at haptics.locky.me. The source code is on GitHub, and it's MIT licensed, so you can use it freely in any project.